Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Hope that you are all fine. This is Tahira bint Rashid, lecturer, Department of Biology, Marsden College, Uttara, Dhaka. Welcome to today's video class. Our today's topics are from chapter 13, Environment of Life. Topics are ecosystem, components of an ecosystem, ecosystem of a pond, food chain and its types, food web. From these topics, students should be able to describe definition of ecosystem, interrelation between the elements of an ecosystem, different components of ecosystem, definition of food chain, and different types of food chain. Also, concept of food web. Now, ecosystem. An ecosystem is any unit of landscape where there are non-living substances, food-producing green plants, animals depend on plants, microorganisms for the disintegration of the dead bodies of organisms, and a proper interrelation between these elements. Interrelation between the elements of an ecosystem. Both green and non-green plants absorb mineral salts from the soil as food. Herbivore animals survive by eating different parts of plants in different ways. Carnivorous animals consume herbivorous animals and other small carnivorous creatures. Waste materials from all animals become mixed with the environment again. After death, all plant and animal bodies go back to the environment and are disintegrated. Bacteria and microorganisms do this disintegration process. This way, the balance in the natural environment is maintained. This flowchart shows the cyclic relationships among the different components of an ecosystem. Now, components of an ecosystem. The living community, inanimate components of the environment and the physical conditions collectively develop an ecosystem. Different components are non-living matter, physical components, living organisms. Non-living matter. Non-living matter harbors the habitats of living organisms, provide them with oxygen for respiration and can supply some nutrient components as well. The components of all inanimate materials can be divided into two groups: inorganic matter and organic matter. Inorganic matter: water, air, and mineral substances in the soil which have not evolved from any living body but exist before the emergence of organisms are the inorganic components of an ecosystem. Example: calcium, potassium, iron, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, etc. Organic matter: the waste materials of plants and animals or the dead bodies of organisms or substances derived from them are called the organic matter of an ecosystem. They are generally termed as humus. Some of the components of humus are urea, cells, tissue, and organs of plants and animals. Now, physical components. The amount of sunlight, temperature, presence of water vapor in the air pressure and wind, depth and height from the surface of the earth. All these influence the ecosystem and are called the physiological components of the ecosystem. Now, living components. Living world is the active component of ecosystem. They cause changes in the environment through their activities. The living components of environment are of three types: producers, consumers, transformers or decomposers. Producers. The producers are the green plants. Green plants, in the presence of sunlight, obtaining carbon dioxide from the air and absorbing water from the soil, produces their foods, carbohydrates. These green plants are also called autotrophs. Consumers. They directly or indirectly depend on plants for their food. This is why they are called heterotrophic animals. Consumers of the first line. The animals which directly consume plants as food are called herbivorous. Herbivorous are the consumer of the first line. Grasshoppers, chickens, cows, goats, deer, etc. are the examples of herbivorous animals. Now, consumers of the second line. The animals which depend on herbivorous animals for their food are the consumers of the second line. Carnivorous animals are the secondary consumers. Toad, fox, tiger are example of carnivorous animals. Now, tertiary or top consumers. The animals which eat secondary consumers are also carnivorous. They are called tertiary consumers or top consumers. Peacock, snake, tiger, etc. are top consumers. There are also animals who like to eat dead bodies of other organisms than the living body. They keep the environment clean by eating dead bodies of different organisms. These are called scavengers. For example, vulture, crow, fox, hyena, etc. are the examples of scavengers. Now, decomposers. Some microorganisms like bacteria, fungus get their food from the waste of plants and animals and their dead bodies. They are mixed with the soil and water by being decomposed. These mixed components can be again consumed as food components. This is why these microorganisms are called transformers or decomposers. Now, components of ecosystem through a flowchart. From this chart, we can see that the components of ecosystem may be non-living, physical and living components. Non-living components may be two types: inorganic substance and organic substance. On the other hand, living components may be producer, consumer and decomposer. Consumer may be herbivore or consumer of first level, carnivore or consumer of second level, then consumer of third level and top consumer. Ecosystem of a pond. In the diagram, we see different types of components of a pond ecosystem. Here the components are big fish, small fish, different types of microorganisms, aquatic plants, decomposers, sunlight, water, etc. The non-living components are the different types of organic and inorganic components. The living components are the producers, consumers of the first level, consumers of the secondary and tertiary levels, and different types of decomposers. Producers. The producers are the photosynthetic algae and plants of shallow water. The free-floating microscopic organisms are called plankton. Phytoplankton, green algae, and other aquatic plants which produce food through photosynthesis are called primary producers. Now, consumers. Consumers of the primary level. Different types of floating insects, larvae of mosquito, very small animals, zooplankton, rui, cuttlefish, etc. are the consumers of the first level. Free-floating small animals are called zooplankton. These consumers cannot produce their own food themselves, so they live by directly consuming the primary producers. Consumers of the secondary level. Small fishes, some aquatic insects, toad, etc. are the consumers of the secondary level. They cannot produce their food themselves and cannot directly consume the primary producers. They eat the consumers of the first level as their food. Consumers of the tertiary level. The consumers which is secondary consumers such as small fishes, prawns, etc. is called the tertiary consumer. Shoal, bhetki, boal, like big fishes, and stork are consumers of the tertiary level. Decomposers. Many fungi, bacteria live in the pond as saprophytes, and they are the decomposers. Now, food chain. When the food energy is flown from the primary producers through different trophic levels, then this flow is called food chain. For example, the green grass on a field is the primary producer. Grasshoppers live on this grass. The toad eats the grasshoppers, and the snake eats the whole toad as its food. If the snake is small and there is no larger quiz snake around it, a reptile of lizard family, it will definitely eat the snake. In the above case, a food chain may be formed as shown in the flowchart. In different ecosystems, food chains may be different, such as predator food chain, parasitic food chain, saprophytic food chain. The predator food chain is where organisms of the primary level are of the smallest size, and consecutively consumers of the higher levels prey the organisms of the lower levels and eat them. Parasitic food chain. Parasitic plants and animals in most of the cases derive their food from a host much larger in size than they are. In some cases, other smaller parasites are depend on all the parasites for their food. For example, mosquito feed on man, and mosquito is the carrier of the dengue virus. Now, saprophytic food chain. If a food chain is stretched from the dead organisms to the different trophic levels, then it is called a saprophytic food chain. For example, fungi found on the dead bodies or feed the dead bodies, and earthworm feed the fungi. Food web. When some food chains collectively form a net or web-like structure, it is called a food web. Here, the diagram shows the example of a food web. Here, algae is consumed by the zooplankton and small fish. Again, small fish and big fish consume the zooplankton, and big fish consume the small fish, and hog consume the big fish and small fish. 5 food chains are found in the food web mentioned here. The food chains are these 5. Now, relative quotient. In the stem, we see some organisms. The organisms are grass, zooplankton, falcon, frog, fish, mosquito larvae, snake, and grasshopper. And the questions are: number A, what is ecosystem? B, what do you mean by food chain? C, the above mentioned consumers are of which level? Explain. D, what will be the change in the ecosystem in absence of a marked organism mentioned in the stem? Analyze.